Hi and welcome back to Hero Movement. Today we're going to look at Zone 2 training, just give a little overview what it is, what are some of the potential benefits and how you can incorporate Zone 2 training into your existing movement practice. Let's take a look. The Zone 2 training is known by other names. It's often referred to as MAF or MAF training after Phil Maffetone, who is an endurance coach and kind of a pioneer of this sort of training. You'll also hear it referred to as steady state or fat burning zone training as well. It's essentially a low intensity form of aerobic training that involves performing an activity for a prolonged time period at a sub-maximal heart rate. It's usually somewhere between 30 to 90 minutes and sometimes longer. It's typically used in running, cycling, swimming and triathlon, but it can also be adapted for other activities like rope flow or shadow boxing or other sports as well. So we can think of our endurance focused movements for kind of the average modern human. You can think of them on a spectrum of intensity. So at the lower end we have what we spend most of our time doing. It's kind of being sedentary or some low level activity, maybe walking. So that would be kind of zone 0, zone 1 sort of stuff. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have occasional bursts of more kind of zone 3 to zone 6 stuff. So this is the higher intensity type of training, HIIT, CrossFit WODs, that sort of stuff. We have little bursts of that, and even strength training to some degree. Your average 5K or average bike ride would sort of be more towards this end as well, maybe kind of zone 3, zone 4. So for many of us, there's not that much work being done in that in-between zone, which is our zone 2. So our zone 2 training is there to kind of fill gaps in our practice. It's not necessarily about replacing what you're currently doing, but just to complement your existing training and help you get the most out of it. The idea with Zone 2 training is to build a foundation that complements everything else you do in life, your other training, everyday activities and sports as well, and just kind of makes things a little bit easier for you. So as well as being generally quite healthy for your cardiovascular system and your respiratory system, Zone 2 training is a great way to build your aerobic base. Having a strong aerobic base means you can work at higher intensity while maintaining a lower heart rate. In other words, you can perform at a higher level, you can go faster whilst placing less stress on the body, which sounds good to me. Because you are primarily working in the aerobic system when you're performing your Zone 2 training, you're encouraging the body to use fat as a fuel source. So dietary fat and body fat is used to replenish ATP, which is kind of our energy currency in the body. This is in contrast to higher intensity training, which is more dependent on glycogen, stored carbohydrates, to replenish ATP. So working in Zone 2 essentially encourages your body to burn more fat. Others have reported other benefits like reduced inflammation and reduced injury risk, but I'm not confident that those benefits are going to kind of apply across the board to everyone. I'm not saying that they don't happen, but yeah, I wouldn't be confident saying that they do. On a personal note, I've noticed that Zone 2 training goes hand in hand with nasal breathing and improved breathing mechanics, which there's some interesting links between that and reduced state anxiety. It also fits quite nicely with barefoot running. So it can be a nice way to kind of stack some of these healthful practices all at the same time. So one of the first steps to get started with Zone 2 training is to calculate your upper limit of Zone 2, also referred to as your MAF heart rate. To do this, you can use a formula devised by Phil Maffetone, which is essentially 180 minus your age. So that gives you your heart rate in beats per minute that you should aim to train at or below. You adjust that number based on other parameters like your health status and your training volume. I'll link to a resource down below where you can kind of figure it out for yourself. So for most people, the general rule of thumb, this number is the point where you're going to kind of see the transition from being mainly aerobic, so using fat as a fuel, to being more anaerobic, so depending more on glycogen to replenish ATP. So we're looking to train at or below this heart rate. If you don't have a heart rate monitor, or you just don't want to be that accurate or finicky with your zone 2 training, you don't have to. You can go by the talk test. So generally your zone 2 pace is going to be a pace that is easy to hold a conversation at. If you already run quite regularly, it's almost definitely going to feel a lot slower than your normal pace, sometimes frustratingly slow. So a typical zone 2 session for me would include a few minutes of prep work, just warming up the joints. Then I'd do a 5 to 10 minute brisk walk, then move into the bulk of the zone 2 training, whether it's a run, where I'd be looking to stay at or around 10 beats below my zone 2 threshold. So this could be anywhere between half an hour to over an hour, and then follow that up with a 10 to 15 minute walk just to cool down. It does feel slow to start with, but over time, what you'll ideally start to see is that at the same heart rate, you start to move at a faster pace. There's lots of examples of people who typically compete in sports or activities that are considered more kind of fast twitch or glycogen dependent, say like a 5K race, shorter duration. They spend time building their base just with zone 2 training, and they see their 5K times improve as well. So it's not just a technique for people who are looking to go long distances. It seems that there is some crossover to shorter, faster events as well. Essentially, if this is something that you are not currently doing in your training, then there's potentially a gap there that there's room for improvement. So how do we go about incorporating zone 2 training into an existing movement practice? So some people, the purists, kind of advocate at least 6 months solely dedicated to zone 2 training. So you kind of build your aerobic base before reintroducing any higher intensity stuff, like speed work or even strength training. So just like you might dedicate a 3 to 6 month block to working on strength, you can kind of do that with zone 2 training. However, while this can work for some people during an off season, it's not something that I'm necessarily a massive fan of. It's not really realistic for athletes who compete in sports. They're active and their sport requires them to vary the intensity of vary the pace, and they need to fit in skill work and strength work as well. So I kind of prefer just integrating zone 2 with my normal strength and mobility work. It's kind of the concurrent training approach. So while it might be more effective to dedicate a big block of training to one thing at a time, arguably, for me, it's just not something that really resonates with me at the moment. I don't compete at the moment, but I just sprinkle in some high intensity cardio stuff now and again whenever I feel like it. Some sprints or kettlebell swings. So my current template is to have kind of a more of a strength day, and then the day after a zone 2 endurance day followed by a rest day, and just kind of rinse and repeat that. It may not be the most effective schedule for everyone, but I'm seeing improvements in my kilometer times from month to month, so it seems to be working okay for me at the moment. So to recap, zone 2 training is essentially low intensity, long duration, slow aerobic training. It's a good way to build an aerobic base, and it is something that is often missing from the average endurance athlete's toolkit, and especially for the average kind of gym goer, it's something that we could probably all benefit from to a degree. That being said, it doesn't have to completely replace your other training. It can go hand in hand quite nicely with strength training and the occasional high intensity burst too. So the idea is you build a solid base aerobic capacity that all your other training sits on top of nicely. Makes you more effective in everything else that you do. So I hope that was helpful. Hope it was a decent overview of Zone 2 training. If you've got any questions, let me know down in the comment section below. If you're already doing some Zone 2 training, let me know how you're getting on. And yeah, have a healthy, heroic week. Stay safe and see you soon.